Welcome everybody. We're just waiting for Facebook to preview and now we're going to go live. Okay. Let's put my headphones on. Alrighty, welcome to Crafters Tavern. This is the first time I am broadcasting this across Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter and Periscope. So thank you for joining me in this. Of course, there were probably going to be hiccups along the way. If you can't hear me or anything like that, type in the chat. The only chat that's not going to appear in the window will be Facebook and also the Twitter. And also feeding back into 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 the Twitter. Can you hear me now? Oh wait, there is a bit of a delay, so we'll just see if that has made a difference. I also think that it's recycling because I can hear myself, so it's probably through one of the chats, through one of these open windows. Ah, it is. It's through Facebook. Swine thing. Okay. All right. It wouldn't be Crafters Tavern without some kind of audio problem. So, hopefully now everyone can hear me. I'm going to try and get the Facebook comments. It's feeding back It's Facebook every time. All right. So I'm going to try and see the Facebook comments. The comments are coming in from YouTube, Twitch, and Periscope. That is being burnt into the broadcast. But Facebook is not at this point because the people who create this software have not been able to get Facebook to play ball. At the moment, us on YouTube don't see a wait or on double. I don't know what that means. Anyway, thank you to Kyle for joining us, Eric for joining us, and Nicholas. I say hi to Abram, who's watching us now. Thank you for joining us. And you can call in via Skype, the DMG info. Of course, you can ask questions in the chat sections and the various different things. So hopefully here we've ironed out most of the problems. There is a minor delay between me talking and you receiving the video. It's probably about 10 seconds. So we have about 11 people watching us at the moment. And there's Taking 20. You should be calling me in, Cody, because you've got to talk about your experiences in Gen Con 50, and then I'll shut you up so that, you know, we don't have to hear that crap anymore for those of us who weren't there. Anyway, I really wanted to start the show by saying thank you to someone who's been following my channel since almost the beginning, and I know he was following from the beginning because he won my first 300 subscriber competition, and his name was Brad Smith. Now, Brad has his own Twitch channel called Devious Dungeon Painting. So it's twitch.tv/Devious Dungeon Painting, where he paints miniatures live on Twitch. And I was randomly on Twitch the other day. Well, it's not the other day. It was actually a couple of months ago. And I found his channel, and he was giving away the thing he was painting. So it was like all of a sudden there was a competition in the chat, and you had to type something in the chat, and it basically this competition, and someone was going to win this. Now, obviously, his normal subscribers on Twitch were there, and he had, you know, everyone was following him, and I randomly won what I'm about to unbox. The funny thing is, Brad won that 300 subscriber competition. Now, you'll know what it is because at the beginning of all my crafting videos, you see the blood fountain in the beginning, which is the sort of stone structure with the skull and the blood pouring out of it. He won that in the subscriber competition. So the first thing he runs on his, I win his, totally at random. So I thought it would be fitting that we, I wait until I'm able to do this live and actually say thank you to Brad. Not only for what's in here. I've only seen it on video, so I haven't seen it close up. It's a painted dragon, but he also shipped it out to me as well, which, as you can see, is not cheap to send to Australia. Yeah. Brad has since moved, so that address is no longer his if you are sending him pizza later on. So I'm just going to see if I can switch the camera to a different thing so I can show the actual screen here. And I'm going to excuse all my skeletons and stormtroopers and stuff all over the show here. I'm trying to mount this on my... nah, this is going to get wonky. You can tell I'm a Coke fiend. Alright, so let's get this bad boy open. I am jealous, Cody, even though I've only just seen your comment. Alright. Okay. So, there it is. So this is the bad boy that Brad has painted. Now, Brad is quite a good skilled miniature painter. And this is the bad boy that I randomly won. Get this thing to focus on his Twitch. And I love the Starry Night sort of wing effect that he does. I've seen him do it on cloaks and things like that. Yeah, I highly suggest that you check out Brad's Devious Dungeon Painting Twitch channel. He is also on Facebook as well, and he does commissions. So if you've got miniatures that want to be painted, he's the man to chat to. Let's have a look at those wings. So that's going to take pride of place on top of my monitor. After I've thrown everything away. So this is where I keep all my prize of place things. This was done by a subscriber of mine a few years ago. He's got a gift that someone else gave to me hanging off his arm. And yes, so I really enjoy those sort of things. And thank you very much, Brad, for that completely unexpected win. But, you know, such is life. Things randomly happen. All right. Wylock and Taking 20 in the chat. Why are you in the chat and not in the Skype? Why are you not in the Skype? I'm just sitting here talking to myself and everybody's just typing stuff at me when you can just Skype in. Right. Getting back to the action. Shoot you a link. It's called Skype. You type in my contact details you've already got and you just click call. That's how it works. This is the 21st century. Anyway, obviously a lot has been happening in the past month or so. You've had Gen Con. You've had a lot of different crafting videos going up. You've had Hankran Fernale doing his around America / Canada road trip that's been happening on Facebook. So there's been a lot happening outside of YouTube, I was ill for about a month. I had a respiratory problem, and so I was also out of Australia. I was in Africa for a while. That's why my videos had slowed down, but that should be picking up again. So there are 11 people watching us, but no one is calling in because they're all afraid I'm going to take them apart, especially Cody. It's all about the codiness. I'd also like to thank my patrons on Patreon who help support 70 System. They are the ones that help make these sort of things possible. They're supporting 70 System, obviously, but you know, essentially they are supporting my other channels as well. So Cody is Skyping in. Let me just sort all this out. Cody, how are you? So you can hear me. Excellent. Okay, hold on. I've just got to add you into the special viewing transmitter machine. But so everyone, if you can't hear Cody, please type it in so that we can sort out any issues that are going. So first of all, Cody, what was Gen Con all about? You've got 2 minutes and that's it. Yes, everyone. I didn't realize I was that pissed. Yeah. Yeah, you didn't get the "I love you, man." You didn't get to that stage.
It'd been worse, but yeah, I survived it. So, well,
So-
what else going on in your world? I see you got some crazy stream going, and
Yes,
What's
I am
up with you, man?
experimenting. You know me, I am the grand experimenter. I'm experimenting with broadcasting on too many things at the same time. Yeah, I just want to address something in the comments. They say that they can barely hear Cody. So hopefully, I've just made a small change here. Hopefully that has changed as we continue
let's
on.
see if this sounds a little better.
That's it.
There we go.
I can hear you, but I don't know. I'm experimenting with different streaming technology to see how this all works. So it's going to be one of the. It wouldn't
It's
be a
almost like
Crafter's
you've
Tavern.
never used the internet before.
Warlock's coming in. So hold on.
Oh,
a sec.
dude, let's get Bill in here. Yeah.
Hold on 1 sec. I think I hung up on Cody. Hold on. Just call me back. Yeah, I accidentally hung up on you. So hold on 1 sec. I'm just going to add him to this call.
That's cool, man. I'm just sitting down for dinner. I got nowhere to go.
Here we go.
We gotta do all the Twitter things, right? Let people know, hey, we're popping on.
Yep. There we go. You there, Bill? No, he called
I'm just
me.
gonna keep smiling for the camera, right? That's what you're supposed to do.
That's how these things work, you know. It's much easier when it's like if I'm DMing and rolling dice and recording all at the same time. It's much easier than just trying to like talk to people.
Well, I tell you what, while you do that, we'll talk about Gen Con. We'll fill some dead space while you get Bill up here.
Fine, talk
So,
more about Gen Con.
Oh my gosh! All right. So I don't know if you guys have ever been to Gen Con, but man, whirlwind for sure. I definitely learned some things, right? So like the first day, don't schedule anything. Don't schedule anything. That's your day to like see people, check everything out, find out kind of what all's going on, and you're probably going to want to hang with anybody that you're meeting up there because man, it was like you get there and it's like you want to do everything, but you can't. There's like no way that you can do it all. So definitely learn that. Don't schedule 5-hour D&D games on the first day of Gen Con. That's maybe not the best use of your time.
There's not enough time in the day.
Oh man.
And then some people get really ambitious, so they want to not only play in a game, they want to run a game and run a live stream and and see all the stuff. I had a really expensive ticket. I bought a ticket. It was $62 for True Dungeon. So and then I paid $30 for an escape room, which was fantastic. I got to go to that. But the only thing I did 2 events. Like I spent like $115 or so on all these events. I ended up going to 2 of them, and the rest of the time was just like being overwhelmed by Gen Con the whole time. Yeah, I would love to go. It is on my list of things to do. But obviously it's a little bit more expensive because I got to fly all the way over there.
Oh man.
I don't know what's happening. I'm adding Wylock to the call, and it does not seem to be.
Not going smooth, huh?
It's not going smooth. These things never go smooth. I'm trying to concentrate on what you're saying. I'm trying to concentrate on the chat.
I got you. Let's see. Add people to this call. Can we add not on this call? Let's add Bill to this call.
Yeah, let's see what happens if you add him.
Uh-oh, it's dialing. Here we go. We might get it going. For a guy, there we go. For a guy that was like, hey, Skype, learn how to use it. And then hey, Bill, what's going on, man?
Hey, Cody. Gareth?
Hey, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Ah, excellent. It's that time of the month again.
Yep.
We've got to do a stream with no audio. So what's been happening on the channel? I see you've done Gothic buildings now.
Yeah, that one's doing pretty well. It's gotten into the 40K community, which is sort of a untapped audience so far for me.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going good. I didn't want to step in. You were talking about Gen Con?
Nah, man. Okay, Gen Con happened. Craziness. lots of drinking and gaming for 4 days. The end.
Lots of drinking.
Well, I mean, come on, you know, it's a family
Lots
show,
of
right?
Gaming.
There's no. I've seen Gareth's channel. It's not a family show.
We do have kids watching, but you know, this is this is how these things work, unfortunately. Sorry, I'm trying to add Bill to the main stream here. Obviously, you can hear him, but you can't see him yet. So I am running, learning, and doing all kinds of things all at the same time. Which, you know, being a DM, this should be perfectly comfortable situation.
You know, I saw with the new stream that you guys got going on. So I mean, you're pretty much doing this all the time from Australia, right? You got to be an expert by now, buddy. Come on, let's make it happen, Captain.
I haven't used this software before, so I'm learning the software while I'm while I'm actually doing the show, rather than because you know, otherwise I've got to Skype a whole bunch of people, and they're like, "Why are we talking to you at like on a Tuesday morning?" You know, it's the only time I can do these things.
Well, like, man, your channel has been blowing up, dude. There's been craziness.
Yeah.
Is it surreal at this point yet that it's just like exploding?
Yeah, it was weird. The that functional waterfall one is up to like 225,000 views now.
Oh my gosh!
And it all happened in like a month and a half period. So it's just, I think that one's been showing up on non-gamers recommended, you know, views, like people who are into gardening or something like that. But
it's like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
So what's the rundown if I'm like an all digital DM, right? I'm all digital. So like what's the like basic stuff that I should have in my home game kit if I wanted to do some like terrain and stuff like that? Like I have two experts in front of me. So what do you guys like if I wanted to just jump in from the beginning? Where would I start?
I think
DMG's channel.
Yeah, I was gonna say
all of our YouTube videos, right?
Either Scotty or DMG's methods. If you're gonna jump in like for the first time, it's easy to get a fast, easy dungeon tile. Mine are extremely tedious to make. You know, they look pretty good, but they're
so start with DMG and Scotty, and then when you want to get serious, then you get move to Wylock's channel. That's when you get to the serious hardcore stuff.
When you get to become a masochist.
I just hate myself. I'm gonna go craft all day.
But that's exactly how I started. You know, I made a set of Gareth's tiles, and I don't know if they're in my closet or what, if I still have them, but. You can't go wrong with it.
So let me ask you guys: do you guys prefer to do all the painting of minis yourself, or do you guys like the kind of prepackaged stuff that are like, you know, pre-paints? I mean, I know you do all your painting and stuff for your terrain, but like what's your ratio? Would you rather just spend all your time on creating awesome tiles and scenes and cathedrals and just super crazy awesome stuff, and then just, you know, have people bring in unpainted minis or just prepackaged minis, or do you just love painting minis as much as you do terrain stuff?
So for me, I only got into miniature painting this past March, and I've dove in, and now I'm 100% that. I really have no interest in the pre-painted, you know, D&D miniatures and stuff. Games Workshop makes incredibly expensive stuff, but in my opinion, it's worth it. It's you get what you pay for. The quality is incredible. I just invested in an Iwata Eclipse upgrade from my beginning one, and but anyway, before all that, you know, I did paper miniatures, and that's, I think, my second most viewed episode. How to do your own cardstock miniatures. So you can bang out 50 miniatures in a 4-hour evening using that method. And that's how I started, and that's what I did for a couple years, running my D&D sessions, which is nice because if you need to use one odd monster for one night, a particular encounter, you don't want to spend $20 or whatever to find the bespoke miniature out there. It's all cardboard. So That's how I would start out.
All right, cool deal.
I started out with Green Army Men and a Markland train set from the 50s. And someone in the chat asked if it's okay to talk about 40k terrain. Absolutely, because in terrain building, I used to do tons of 40k terrain using Markland train sets. But I did start with D&D, so I used to make a lot of paper dungeons, so print stuff out from the computer from very early Windows 3.1 type paint programs.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I'm showing my age here. Yeah, so, you know, and we made these sort of modular paper dungeons, and we would make these massive things and literally play a game that would have run for about 20 hours straight. So we would leave school on a Friday evening, go to someone's house and play all the way to Sunday morning, and have breaks for, you know, going to the loo and eating, and that's about it. Then Sunday you're like, and Monday morning you're back to school and you can't remember what happened on the weekend. So that's when I was 13.
Man, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous of that stuff. So, you know, I grew up in Texas, and, you know, my dad, he's like, Dungeons and Dragons is the devil. You're going to be sacrificing kids in no time, and you're going to be, it's a cult. And so, you know, like, dude, it was such a bummer. When I love hearing stories where, you know, people are talking about playing as kids, because you know, if I was playing as a kid, it was like, you know, we had to sneak over to a buddy's house and play for a few hours, but don't tell dad. Like, we wouldn't tell my dad at all. So I gotta admit, I'm super jealous. Not gonna lie.
And so you should be, because you got to go to Gen Con and we did not.
I'm making up time, man. I'm making up time.
No, I mean well, I didn't have a problem with, you know, parents saying no, you can't do that kind of thing, but we just had a problem with the fact that there were no game stores, and in Africa it was like no one played D&D, no one played 40k that we knew of, because everyone was kind of dispersed. There were people who were playing, but there was no formal kind of arranged websites or get-togethers or whatever, you know. Now it's a lot bigger than it used to be. So you've got channels like How to Be a Great GM. I mean, he's in South Africa now. He's, you know, that's a really good channel. So you can see that the community in South Africa has grown significantly. But I haven't lived there in 14 years, so you know, my perception of it is back then when you didn't know who was playing, and it really was a closeted thing. Not that there was a negative perception of it. I mean, there may have been a negative religious perception of it or something to that effect, because during the apartheid era, there was a negative religious perception of practically everything. But it was just one of those things that no one thought anybody played this, so they didn't even bother going against it. So whenever anybody went overseas, if they went to England or the US or whatever, it was always like, oh, can you get us this? You know, you have all these beautiful catalogs that you've seen of stuff that you can't order because they don't ship to South Africa. I mean, I think Amazon doesn't ship to South Africa now. So, you know, that's the kind of thing we were living in. It's like, okay, we want this, and this. And the guy goes, I can't bring all this back. What do you want? What one thing do you want? And okay, we'll get the rule book, because at least then we can use Green Army Men for 40k or for Warhammer Fantasy or whatever. And then we'd start making our own paper minis from pictures in the rule book, and that's pretty much how we had to play. So, you know, that's how my gaming has evolved. It's really, I had to concoct all my own rules and my own terrain and everything the whole time.
So you had that like DIY spirit, like right from the jump.
Well, you had to. There was no other way to do it.
What about you, Bill? When did you like jump into all this madness? Was it early or late in life?
You mean like gaming, D&D?
Yeah.
In general? I think when I was around 10 or 11, my cousin introduced me to D&D. Was into it for a few years, 3 or 4 years, and then really didn't touch it again until I don't know, 5 years ago. So it must have been 15 years that I didn't even think about D&D. And then one day, we have a church small group that we would meet, and I just said, is anyone interested in trying? And they all were. So I cracked open the GM tome and it read everything because it had been 15 years. And we had, I'd say for a year, we met regularly, and it went really well, and it's been off and on since then. But that was around the same time I also found Scotty's channel and then Garrett's. And so Magic the Gathering, played that all my life. And then
dude,
yeah.
Yes. Who doesn't like Magic the Gathering?
Right. And then wargaming, just got into in the past year and a half or so. Are you into wargaming at all? I know your channel's focused on role-playing, but...
Okay, I would love to. The problem with me is time. It's time. Funny little unknown fact is, I don't know if you guys remember back in the day, like right around 3rd edition 3.5, they had Dungeons and Dragons miniature, the game. Right? I don't know if you guys actually remember
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they had the little cards, everything like that, and it was a gridded out war game, right? So it's not open terrain. It's all 3.5 move. I'm sorry if y'all can hear my dogs like losing it in the background here, but I love that. Zeus and Hades are losing their mind. Yes, I used to play that, and I actually was ranked all the way up to like the 3rd highest player in the state of Texas for my like DCI number, because Wizards did that for that and Magic the Gathering at the same time. So yes, I did do that, but I never had the chance to get into like 40K or Hordes or War Machine or anything like that.
Well, some people, we'll take 40K for example. There's generally 3 sides to it, right? The hobby, the lore, and the actual game. Some people only pick one of those to get involved in, and that's what drew me to it, was the lore. I found the 40K Wikia, which is like 85,000 pages, and you could spend your entire life reading it. But it's like, Lord of the Rings comes down to a huge conflict at the end, and most fantasy series do, and it's everything's gearing toward that. And in 40K, that's a slow Tuesday, and it's happening all over the galaxy. It's huge, and so if you just invested in the lore and check that out, and I know you're doing Starfinder preview stuff right now, there's so much to draw from there that could serve your role-playing experience. Just drawing from the lore of those games, even if you don't care about actual wargaming.
Then I may have to check that out, because I'm getting more and more into science fantasy. Like I'm a Green Lantern fan, so like the space epic, Star Wars, that's a science fantasy game, genre, and I'm really digging it. So I'll have to check out more into that than I have. I don't think I've given it a fair shake, really.
Yeah, 40K is fascinating. I mean, I knew about 40K. I found a white dwarf randomly in a small town in Australia when I was visiting in 1994. And it was just like this huge dwarf on the cover, covered in like, this armored gear with a machine gun. I was like, wow, this looks really cool. What the hell is this? So I paid the $5 or whatever it was, which for me was like 50 Rand, which was an enormous amount of money. Because this was just like the most fascinating thing I've ever seen. So we then, from the small town, we were visiting my grandparents. So I was poring over this magazine for about a week. And then we went to Sydney, and they had a Games Workshop store there. So I went into the Games Workshop store, and they said, "Oh, would you like to play a game of 40K?" I'm like, all right. So, I was there for
Would I like to play?
Would I like to play? Do you know who I am, man? I'm from the future. So, yeah, I played in this game, and I was like, this is absolutely incredible. Now, of course, the magazine had cost me basically all the money I had because I was 16 at the time. And my mom was not going to spend the $100 it was for the box set. So that was not happening. So I grabbed all the free stuff I could, which was at that time catalogs and painting guides and whatever was free in 1994. And I went on my merry way back to South Africa, and my friends and I pored over this stuff. And I was on a field hockey tour to the UK in my final year of high school. I basically finished high school and then was on this field hockey tour. And of course, you go into the UK, you're going to Games Workshop. So I basically threw out all my clothes on the final day of being in the UK and just filled my bag with as much Games Workshop stuff as I possibly could. Because all my friends
that is
said,
awesome.
My one friend says, I want to be Chaos, and I wanted to be Space Wolves, and my other friend wanted to be Eldar, and we just like, okay, so each person bought the armies. And here I am coming back with excess baggage, no clothes, and all my hockey gear. Just, going through customs, going, nothing to declare.
Dude, awesome.
And so that's was how we started. But we actually reverse engineered the rules from that one white dwarf. We went through the game. There were about 3 battle reports in the magazine, and we reverse engineered the rules. Okay, so this is how this game actually works. And then when we got the actual rule book, we realized, okay, so each turn, each player moves and then shoots and whatever. Because we were playing, everybody moves, then everybody shoots, because that's how the battle report was written. It's like, why don't they write it the way it's supposed to be written? So that's how we started 40K. And so there is a question in the chat that came up a little while ago. I'm looking to build a dwarven hold, either being taken over by Skaven or orcs. So Wylock, you're busy doing the terrain build for that kind of stuff. How would you go about a dwarven hold being taken over by Skaven or orcs?
Well, when you think dwarven architecture, it's big, bold shapes and stuff, and actually I think it's kind of similar to the Gothic buildings I just did. I would probably look for Mines of Moria, Google image search to get inspiration for what the architecture looks like, and just use that to spin up the terrain. If you need to get that sort of paneled look that they tend to have, you just slap on layers of chipboard, smaller and smaller pieces, to build out a nice tapered shape. And then I would think you would just put your miniatures around it. If it sounds like he wants to build a diorama as opposed to like a set piece for an actual game, but just pose out your miniatures.
Yeah, I mean,
I use Google image search for everything.
I would say you want to distinguish it from things like elves and whatever, because there's a lot of elven stuff that people do in fantasy. It's always kind of like the elves are the main focus, and they tend to be curved lines and sort of lacy, like
right,
plants and things growing all over it. Whereas dwarves is kind of, I would say, cubic and solid. So you would want that kind of almost Lego brick sort of bang, 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 angular sort of look to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Arches would be triangular as opposed to curved. And there'd be a lot of sculpture, and the walls would be carved with a lot of glyphs and things that are inspired by runes. And yeah, just kind of so that's how I would approach the dwarven aspect of it.
Can I play devil's advocate here?
No.
So like when I think of dwarves, I think of the big archways, right? I know you like triangular, but isn't like the arch the most structurally sound piece that you could have in underground caves? I don't know. That's always kind of what I thought is at the top. They're always going to be, the thing about dwarves is that it's going to last. Yep. It's going to last through generations and generations. So I always personally thought that they used a lot of archways because that was what made the strongest, most lasting structures. But I mean,
Bill's the engineer, not me.
That's really it.
Bill's the engineer.
I'm not a crafter. What do I know? I just draw it on Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds.
There was an episode Scotty did real early in his channel. I'm trying to go all the way to the beginning of it, and he did some pillars and then a big encounter tile. It was like the final encounter for that campaign.
Yeah.
And it was all dwarven architecture. So I'm trying to find it, and I'll put the link in the... Can I put the link in the chat, or is it disabled?
It's probably disabled. If you just drop off the YouTube bit, I think, and just put the / and the video, then people can copy and paste.
There it is.
So, in terms of Skaven, Skaven is going to be lots of... I haven't played Skaven a lot, but I played a hell of a lot of Warhammer Quest. And Skaven, I would say it would be a lot of cloth covering things, a lot of organic wood and that kind of stuff. So think of a rat's nest. You know, there's a lot of clutter, and Skaven would be a lot like that. So you'd be a lot of sort of just bags of stuff and collections of things in the corner that they've been hoarding, and you would just have, say, the dwarven sort of cubic architecture or whatever. And then just place all these things over the top of it. Orcs, on the other hand, would be like a bunch of football hooligans had come in and spray painted everything, and you would have a lot of found objects. So I think you would find a mishmash of different, what do you call it? Of different styles of things to get that going. I can hear like 5 people typing.
I don't know. I'm listening to Bill just like he's got his. He's like, oh, we love you, Bill. We love you. All right, hey, listen, Gareth. I had a blast, man. I didn't want to take up your time, especially since this is Crafters Hall. So I've got to go do a meeting. I got a one-on-one with a patron. All right. So I'll catch you guys anytime you guys have time for me. Like, let me know. Shoot me a link or something.
See ya.
Later, guys. Happy gaming.
Cheers.
Take care. All right, so I can't post the link, but it was the episode he did on June 12th, 2013. It's called Boss Fight D&D Encounter. And I'll just put the title in. You should be able to search on that. So that's what I think of when I think about doing a dwarven set piece.
Yeah, so Unstable Attack Squeak says, I was thinking more for materials. So what kind of materials would you use to build these things? So, yeah, I mean, you could use cardboard, and you could, so builds for dwarves, you can just make cardboard cubes and stack them on top of one another and then apply things onto the cardboard. So cut out some glyphs and things and actually stick them on and then dry brush those to make it look like carving. For Skaven and stuff, if you were going to do, someone never mentioned scaffolding and that sort of thing, I would use plastic shopping bags for like cloth, and toothpicks and kebab skewers for like scaffolding, and you can just tie them together with what do you call it, cotton, like just cotton thread. And again, make it wonky looking, so everything's a little bit skew. You can kind of bend the skewers or break the toothpicks just so that they're at an angle, so everything's not just straight and clean. You'd want it a bit all over the show. And then for orcs, just sort of slather their emblems and icons all over everything, and just, you know, bring in bits and pieces of other cultures. Because I always perceive orcs as being collectors of stuff that, you know, they're out raiding and stealing things, so they're kind of just collecting that kind of stuff rather than building it themselves. I don't think there's really anyone who's ever done orc architecture. It's more like orcs have invaded and taken over someone else's architecture.
What about balsa wood? Balsa is good for, I mean, you know, it's real soft, and I don't think you'd want to use it in any dwarven stuff, but
it's also more expensive.
Really? I got some over there. I just got some the other day. It was like $1 for a 4-foot stick.
Okay. All right. Well, I whenever I've seen balsa wood, it's never been cheap, but, you know, we live on an island, so things are differently priced here.
But it's good for texturing, and it won't break like foam so easily. Yeah.
And of course, you can do it out of foam. Then you're gonna have to watch Black Magic Craft, his channels, the foam channel.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, you got to, you know, with foam, you're going to invest in cutters and foam and breathing apparatus and all these kind of, well, according to BMC, you don't actually need the breathing apparatus, but, you know. But you know what I mean. If you don't have that and you're trying to do it, then you've got to have some kind of precaution. And I just don't like really working with foam. I prefer to use cardboard. But that's,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
Mini terrain domain. I'm working on finishing my dice tower interactive terrain. Yes. And I think every dice tower now, if you're on YouTube and streaming, it must have a webcam built into it. So the tray, there's a webcam tray. So that's my next dice tower build, is to modify my existing dice tower mod and mount a webcam into it.
Oh, I see. I thought he meant like it's going to be part of the actual scene that the players' miniatures will go on and roll their own dice, like a being John Malkovich kind of thing.
Dave's joined us, Spunkmeyer Senior. How's it going? He's probably poring over the 70 system pre-release guide that's come out that went to my patrons last week. So he has probably been poring over that all week, or not, as the case may be. I'm not bad-mouthing phone mini terrain domain. I am just saying that my preference is to use cardboard. I don't like the feel of foam. Makes my skin crawl. That's why I don't use it. That doesn't mean you can't use it. It's just I don't like it. I mean, I could wear gloves, but then I've got to wear gloves. I've got to go buy gloves. Which I have gloves, but, you know, now I'm just creating a list of reasons why I don't want to do it.
Hey, not to beat the horse dead, but sometimes, depending on your story, dwarves are synonymous with steampunk. So here's a piece I'm working on right now. It's a base for something, but these are cut up leftover bits of sprue from miniatures. There's a straw, a drinking straw, a bottle cap. This piece right here, this comes from a toy pouch that Wendy's is giving in kids' meals right now. So we've traveled a lot lately. Whenever we stop, I keep those. Some more sprue. Here's some Connects.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. That's Legos. Technic Legos. Here's a cap for like a baby food pouch. And here's some more stuff. So I found that, but really leftover sprues, and I've got tons of them now. So
yeah.
Just festoon the wall with this stuff, and it'll look steampunkish.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much you can do, and it's as I've always said, it's not what a thing is, it's what the thing can be. So you basically the key thing to learn when you're crafting is to look at what something can be rather than what it is. So you start to look at shapes. Oh, what can this shape be? You know, I built some engine boosters from reversed Coke bottles. So I cut out you've got the neck with the cap. So I took the cap off and reversed it and put it back onto the bottle, and then you have engine boosters. So I just cut those out and had those in an X-Wing game as a broken up Star Destroyer. So you had all the things flying around in between the huge chunks of a broken Star Destroyer. That's very cool. That has not hit the channel yet.
Yeah. 2 liters. They make good. You cut them the right way, and they make a good antenna.
Yep.
A satellite dish kind of thing. So I'll be making an array of these for battle scene.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, look at the shape and you go, wow, that looks just like this can become X. And then hopefully the scale suits. It's the same sort of scale. Otherwise, you're going to have to rework it or find, like, for instance, if you wanted to make smaller engine boosters, you find a smaller bottle. Rather than using a 2 liter or a 1.5 liter, you know, you find a 600 or a 500 mil, depending on where you are in the world. I don't know what that is in America. It's like 5,000 ounces or something. I don't know. I don't know how your system works over there.
Yeah, neither do I.
It's like when I was driving there, and it's like, oh, the speed limit's only 80. Jeez, that's not very fast. Then I'm driving, Jesus, 80? No, this can't be. What's this in kilometers? And we work it out. Oh my God, how fast am I driving?
So have you experimented with Dungeon World?
Dungeon
you know
World,
what it is?
The game Dungeon World?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just started reading it. It's on my bookshelf.
Okay, so you have the book.
Yeah, I have the book. Yeah. I haven't played it yet. The only thing I play at the moment is 70 system. I don't play anything else.
Certainly, yeah.
But I do steal things from other games, so that's what it's all about. That's why I have probably about 70 different rulebooks here.
Well, I think since this is Crafter's Tavern, what I like about Dungeon World is it really makes corridors and stuff irrelevant. Yeah. So if you count on the big stuff that's going to happen in the adventure, you can build 2 or 3 set pieces, and that's all you need for the night. And you don't feel like you're compromising on some core piece of the gameplay, like D&D intends with the dungeon crawl. I'll walk 10 feet, I'll use my pole, and that whole joke.
I had a DM when I was younger. He's actually starting a YouTube channel, but it's more about independent gaming rather than D&D. And his thing was, you went from room to room to room. So everything was just a scene, then a scene, then a scene, then a scene, and there were no corridors. So it's just basically you worked your way through a series of rooms. Which was kind of cool. I liked some of that style, but I mean, it's everyone's style is different. I mean, it's like Vampire the Masquerade. You don't really have the dungeon structure as such. You more the city or whatever. But it comes down to the room is a scene, and the passageway is the transition between the scenes. So you're kind of you're traversing from one thing to the next, and so I tend to handle corridors in a not in a round by round way, but in a sort of time passes way. And so then you get to a room, and then that's a scene where you then move into turn by turn by turn. From a crafting perspective, obviously when you're visually seeing the map in front of you, the actual structure of your dungeon can tell a story on its own. So a lot of people are just long corridor room, and there's like no actual reason why these things exist. So I always say you should think about why on earth was this here in the first place, who built this and why, and that purpose needs to come through in the layout. So, if it's a military type building, then obviously there's going to be choke points where there's going to be heavy doors and things like that. So when you say it's a military fortress, you kind of have to lay it out in a way that makes sense as a military fortress, rather than just, again, long corridor room, because it's like, how do you defend this place? And then, if someone else has moved in, or it's abandoned and there's monsters roaming around in there, the original intent still makes sense. And then whatever's in there now has to adjust for that layout. So, choke points, if you've got a whole bunch of rust monsters that are in there, or semi-intelligent creatures that can basically herd you into a choke point. So they kind of entrap you in that way. So, you can actually do that as the DM. You kind of herd the players towards a choke point where there's some other monster waiting, and they, now they don't, so you can use the terrain in that way, and the players can actually see from the way you're unveiling the terrain that this is starting to happen. And that's why I like to have the whole thing laid out. There's some people who like to just put a room down and then a corridor and then take it away and put the next room. But when you can actually see it laid out in front of you, these sort of things you can actually use in your story, and you can actually make the game a lot more interesting through that sort of architectural design. Yeah, straws are incredible.
Yeah.
There's no end to the usefulness of straws.
So here's something that I don't think really any of us do a lot of as far as crafting goes. Props. So forget about the tabletop terrain, but props. Do you have anything on the horizon, or any ideas, or do you think it's just not worth it?
To me, a prop means you're actually going to have something in your story where this prop is going to be useful. Like, for instance, I used to love to make the players draw the map. So you'd have to have someone drawing the map because it's the best way to get them lost. You know, so you think that it's turning to the west. So now I got to roll to see is it turning to the west, and then the map gets confused, you know, and then they actually get lost, which doesn't happen when you're obviously putting the terrain down. So I miss that aspect of it. But, you know, obviously there's a functionality thing where, you know, the person has to draw the map. They may not like doing it. You know, you'd have to have players that like that kind of thing. So one of the things I would do is, if you're going to supply them with a partial map that they then have to complete as part of their quest objective. And the more accurate the map is, the more gold they get or whatever. So that's one sort of prop you could have. Other props would be different weapons. So, you know, if you're a DM who's a stickler for if you're carrying a sword, that's what your weapon is. You can't just swap to whatever you've got in your backpack. They have to put the weapon out in front of them that they're using. I think that's quite cool. So you can actually craft, like, you know, mini weapons. And so the player goes, okay, well, I'm using my axe. So they put the axe out in front of them. You can also have you could also have little stands with numbers on them that are your initiative order. So the people put out in front of them what their initiative score is, and you hand that out to them for each time you start combat. Of course, it depends on the game that you're playing as to whether you need to do that or not. I saw a very cool thing someone was doing with the spell cards for D&D. They had a card wallet, you know, with the clear sleeves in it, and that makes a spell book. So the spells for the day, the wizard has to put those spells in the card thing, so they have to open it up and cast the spell and discard the card, sort of thing. That's quite cool. So you could make a folio that they have to put the spells in. That's their spell book, their selections for the day. That could be really, really cool. Dice rollers, you know, obviously that's something that most people have covered already. Inspiration, Scondy's done little inspiration towers. You could do an inspiration idol or something like that that can be passed around. Like, for instance, in 7D system, we have story value tokens, so you can use coins for that. So you can make your own coins. There's lots and lots of things that you can do. You can hand out equipment, so you could make mundane equipment, so that when you are playing a game, you say, okay, you got a 50-foot rope, you got a 10-foot pole, you got a bucket, you know, all these kind of things. You can actually craft those items and actually give them to the players. And then, you know, they say, well, I use the rope and I use the thing. So it's a little bit like Cluedo or Clue, as they call it in the US. So you got all those little bits and pieces. Yeah, it's, I mean, there's probably a hell of a lot more than that's just sort of the top of my head. So there's a lot of scope for, they're all on my list, you know, my huge list of videos I want to do. I don't know if I'll ever get to the end of the 800, but they're all on there somewhere.
One thing I've been working on is, so I have 4 players at the table. Props that each of them would likely end up with one of, say, 4 pieces of equipment that somehow come together in a puzzle. So there's a long sword, and in the pommel there's an empty socket. Then another player finds a gem. Okay, so that fits in the socket. Now that's a very obvious example, so I wouldn't do that. But something where everybody gets some unique piece, and one of them at some point has to realize there's some commonality or some way that these 2 props might physically interact, and I would build them so that they could. Yep. And then there's an actual physical puzzle for them to solve. Or maybe there's subtle runes on a sword blade that match something that they find in the adventure, but they have to make the player, not the character, has to make the connection or somehow make the prop meaningful, so that they get a big eureka moment. But I'm just not sure yet, because like I said, putting a gem in a pommel is really easy. You can see that the socket's empty. I want something that's subtle that'll really give them a good moment. So that's what I've been working on for props.
I mean, I totally agree with you, and I think that's a fantastic idea. It's just, again, it comes down to who you are and how you DM. Like, I don't like putting puzzles in front of people where it's the player that's the one that's solving the puzzle and not the character, because for me it kind of jumps out of the story. And so if it's any kind of puzzle that's in the game, usually for me it's the character is the one that's solving it, because sometimes, you know, the puzzles could be more complex than any player is capable of doing, but you've got a character with intelligence of 20, which is more intelligent than all of us, so they would be solving the puzzle by rolling. So in other words, that wouldn't work in that situation, but you know, that's how I play. And some people love puzzles and absolutely would love that kind of thing. And so yes, absolutely, that's a fantastic way of doing it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a group type. My guys they're very casual at the table, not huge on role playing, so they're really just playing themselves. It's so yeah, it's a good point. But they're also nerds who like to solve puzzles. So.
Well, also, you know, my players used to hate it because my puzzles, they're fiendish, and so they just don't like them. So, like, no more puzzles. You know, it took us 4 hours to solve the other one.
Mm-hmm.
But they get into it, they really want to solve it, and then it's like, no, we can't do this now. So yeah, I mean, again, each group is their own group, and that's how you got to approach any game system. In my opinion, is the best way to play is the way that your group enjoys playing. You know, doesn't matter really what the rule book says. You know, if you guys want to do it a certain way, you do it a certain way. You know, I mean, it's not, you know, I don't want rules as written. You know, that's. Sometimes those are the worst games. I've played rules as written games. I've played Pathfinder rules as written, and it was the most annoying experience of my life. And that soured me to the game, even though it's very similar to 3.5. I like 3.5, but you know, it soured me to the game because it was rules as written. You know, and so there was no flexibility. It was you could just, there's certain things. I want my character to do something. And it's, well, you can't because the rules don't allow that to happen. It's like, all right, well, now what do I do? Even though it's something your character would do, you know, or even would be capable of doing or would think of doing, you know, you can't do it because the rules don't apply. And I don't like that. Again, some people love that. So, you know, that's, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with playing that way. There's no wrong way to play. It's how your group loves to play. I mean, as you know, with our original D&D, we only had like 10% of the rules, so half of it was made up. So when you get the actual rules, you go, no, well, these are crap. We'll just play the way we've always been playing, you know, because that's how we have the most fun, you know. Yeah, the rules, as Spunk, my senior says, the rules are for guidance. It's really just guide you to help in a collaborative effort, you know, to help you try and have fun. I mean, if you don't like a rule, don't play with the rule, you know, it's because it's your fun. I mean, it's like if you like to watch a movie at double speed, then you like to do that. I don't like watching a movie at double speed. I don't like watching movies with ads in them. You know, I don't like, you know, watching anything with ads in it. But some people want to go and have a cup of coffee when there's an ad break. You know, that's what they like. So, you know, they've got to have the breaks in you got to do it your way.
So how do you see tabletop terrain interacting with 7D system? I've only played online, so I have no idea. I guess I have some thoughts about how it might work, but what are your thoughts on, I guess, the intent of the structure of the rules? And I mean, D&D obviously is written such that you can use a grid or gridless, whatever, but you can definitely use terrain. How do you see it for 7D?
It's actually built around using terrain. It just doesn't specifically say that. So when you actually, I mean, you've played online. I don't know if you've read the rule book yet, but you've played online and you've experienced it in that way. But when you actually play with miniatures, you'll start to see the combat mechanics improve. Like, you know, it's not like they're bad, but you can see there's another level to them where it's taken this into account. It's taken miniatures and terrain into account. Without explicitly saying you can. So, you know, I've tried that. It's a double-edged sword doing something that's storytelling and miniature skirmish, you know. So I don't want to say it's a storytelling game, and I don't want to say it's a miniature skirmish game because it's both. But you don't want to say it's both because some people will say, oh, well, it's not a genuine, you know, it doesn't say anything about miniature skirmish in the rules. And in the storytelling thing, it doesn't, I mean, it talks about telling a story, but it doesn't explicitly go, this is how you should be role-playing, and this is how you should be, you know, it kind of like, here's a guide on what to do. Because when we were testing it using miniatures, and the original measurement system was using feet and 5 inch, you know, 1 inch is 5 feet and that sort of thing. But in the current version of the rules, there is no standardized measurement other than these arbitrary measurements of your reach, and then the area you're in, and the area next to where you are, and the area beyond that, you know. So you can kind of define what that is in your game. So if you want to do that in feet, you can play in feet. If you want to do that in meters, you can do that in meters. So the game doesn't dictate specific measurements, and then in movement you move in a straight line. So one movement is as far as you like within the area you're in a straight line, which is kind of how, you know, Scotty has that video on how he handles movement and that kind of thing. And it's kind of like you can move wherever you like in the area on your turn, so you're not measuring distances and stuff like that. So it's kind of using that technique of a gridless system. If you wanted to play on the grid, then you can, because you're just moving in straight lines. So, you know, that's going to apply to a grid, no problem. And then, you know, when you're using a reach distance, so your standard reach distance would be the squares around you. So again, I don't need to explicitly say that in the rules, but just by putting the figure down, you can go, oh, that makes sense that this would be the reach, or, you know, that the reach would be 5 feet or 1 meter or whatever your measurement you like, you apply it on top of that system. So really that's what I've tried to do, without being explicit, this is how you would do it. Because again, it's one of these things where however you want to play is the way you want to play. If you want to play exclusively online, it works. If you want to play exclusively miniatures, it works. If you want to play science fiction, it works. If you want to play fantasy, it works. You don't have to really modify the rules in any way. So, you know, we played in a Blade Runner, you know, fantasy game, you and I, and then the other one that's on my channel is a UFO XCOM style game, you know, that was very entertaining, and you know, that's the first time we'd done something like that using the system, and we didn't change the rules at all. So you're going from, you know, completely different genres, and fantasy, obviously. The other thing I want to do is, I was thinking about it the other day. I want to do a celebrity game where we're the A-team. So face, Murdoch, BA, and actually be the A-team. And the players would be the characters, and then I would DM the game as an episode of the A-team. You know, because that would be cool. And then I thought, well, you could go even further. You can play Airwolf and Knight Rider, and you could do all the 80s TV shows. And then I thought, no, we could also do a police procedural. So we can do Law and Order. You can do an episode of Law and Order. Because I'm pretty sure there'd be plenty of people who would like to role play Law and Order. Yeah, dong dong.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so Spunkmeyer Senior in the comments there, with practice, the 7D movement system works well. Yeah, I mean, because he's seen the rules in their entirety at this point. So, you know, it overlays over whatever kind of system you want to use. So, you know, that's what I've tried to achieve. And, you know, obviously with time, it will, you know, people will obviously come up with different things. But yeah. Yeah, Blade Runner Mafia courtroom drama. I believe I had a bad incident with a grenade. That's mini terrain domain. Well, there was one in the UFO XCOM game where the guy, the alien was mind controlling him, and then he broke out of it and pretended to still be mind controlled and offered him this nice juicy fruit, which was a hand grenade. And so the alien starts licking it and swallowed it, and the thing exploded inside. Yeah, Leverage would be a cool show as well. I agree with that. What's that other one, the British one, that's very similar to Leverage, where they're all con artists? Yeah, there is Leverage, the role-playing game. I have seen that, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's 70 system is a system. It's like, you know, here's a system, use it to do whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah.
You know, so if you wanted to play Star Wars with it, you can play Star Wars with it. If you wanted to play 40k with it, you can play 40k with it, you know. And, you know, I've tried to make it modular enough that you can basically just bring in whatever you want to use it for. And yeah.
Here's a question, because I'm finding I go through this. Do you find you go through phases where you're just totally really into a particular genre and have no room for anything else, and then you'll move on to another genre? Like right now, as I've said to nauseam now, I'm really into 40k and gothic sci-fi. I haven't touched D&D or anything fantasy in like 6 or 8 months, and I imagine I will. Something will, you know, snap a few months from now. But I just get so focused on and so interested in a particular genre, and it's just hard to bother with anything else. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do, especially with TV shows. So yeah. I will find, like, I've just been watching a whole bunch of documentaries on Bitcoin. And then I went through an indie game phase where I watched like everything there was to do with indie games. So that's what I do with documentaries. But, you know, I'm fascinated. I have a degree in documentary filmmaking, so I get fascinated by these things. I am a great consumer of Netflix TV shows. So it's very, when my wife decides she wants to watch a show, I struggle because we have to watch the same episodes, and I try very hard not to watch ahead, because then obviously I'm re-watching things. But if she says, no, I don't want to watch that show, then it's like 10 episodes, you know, we're in. So for me to consume 3, 4, 5 seasons or something is, you know, I do that. But yeah, I would say in terms of gaming, I try to stick to what I like, especially when it comes to computer games. And I try to use a filter system of friends and people I know who will then suggest certain things, and I'll have a look at it and see if it's something I might like. Because otherwise I wouldn't have a job because I'm too busy playing computer games. Lee is joining us as DM Insomnia. Just hold on 1 second. I'll just add him. Oops, I've cancelled. Lee, I'm going to call you back. I'm going to call you back.
All right.
Sorry, I knocked you off. I'm going to add Lee on. Hold on 1 sec. Add. There he is. Cool. Yeah, so I will get, you know, obsessed with certain aspects of crafting, for instance. So I will start doing a whole bunch of a certain thing, like the pizza box builds and stuff like that. And, you know, so I'll get really into that. And then, of course, you know, something else will pique my fantasy and I'll move on. But yeah, that's essentially, that's what I do. So thank you for joining us, Lee. How are you? Are you there? He's frozen. I've frozen him.
See his face. I see a lot of paint behind him. And some foam.
Oh, he's off. Well, he'll probably be back in a sec.
His Skype crashed.
Probably.
Civilization 5. I haven't played anything since Civ 2, so make a note.
I'm a
'cause I have them.
huge fan of Colonization. Colonization is one of my all-time favorite games. Of all the Sid Meier things, that is one of the best games ever.
Okay.
You're
I
in.
think I'm ready.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Yeah, no, it was weird. It's like you called back, I hit answer, and it just crashed on me. And so I had to completely reboot it.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, Skype. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've had to modify my hosts file so that it doesn't show ads in the middle of all of this.
Oh, wow. Okay. No, it's like you started talking, Warlock, about being stuck in one genre and going to something else.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I got a call because it's happening to me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do, because I do primarily, the darker side of D&D, skulls, evil, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And recently got invited to start trying to build stuff for Starfinder.
Yep.
Some more, or this, I guess it's what, sci-fi, space opera kind of stuff.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
No idea what I'm doing. So now it's like searching YouTube for other people who've done that kind of stuff. But it's hard. I mean, I get stuck in the mindset where I'm doing my normal thing and starting to wonder, it's like, okay, do the materials I normally use even translate to doing this high tech stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
That's where
Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's all about shapes, and then but the shapes in
So that's what I
science
was
fiction, it's a different facade to the same sort of shapes. A spaceship
Right.
is just a dungeon that's floating around.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what you got to think about. Just okay, well, what are the walls? What are the doors? And that's why science fiction is a little bit strange because fantasy, there's a lot of technology that they don't have, like phones and space communication and instantaneous teleportation. These are things that they don't have. So like for instance in a Star Trek game, obviously when you can transport from where you are to a planet, you can change scenery very, very quickly. Whereas in a D&D setting, you're not casting a town portal or whatever every 5 minutes. So
Right.
there's a slower sort of style of game in fantasy, whereas I would assume that with science fiction, the pacing and the way that people communicate is very different. So you have to kind of take that into account when you're structuring the terrain. It's like how would people be getting around? So I would say that there's a lot more mundane stuff in sci-fi than there would be things in D&D. So in D&D, there's a lot of things you would add that would be, like wells and bridges and all this kind of stuff. Whereas in science fiction, it's more mundane. It's kind of like rooms, bedrooms, living rooms, etc. Even in
Right.
modern games, you think of modern buildings, it's just boxes, really.
Yeah.
And so it's not as interesting because although there's craftsmanship in the engineering and the architecture of the way the thing is built, there's very little craftsmanship in things that are mass produced because it's just everything looks the same. Whereas fantasy, everything is handmade, so everything has its own unique quality to it. And so with science fiction and whatever, you got to take that into account, as a lot of things are going to look exactly the same.
Right.
Like with my tiles in fantasy, and with Wylock's, every tile is unique and every tile has a little crack here or slightly different in that way. Whereas the Starship Enterprise, they just use the same corridor from different angles over and over and over and over and over again. So it's just the same carpet, the same wall, the same everything. And you know, the difference would be Star Wars, where Star Wars is more like running around in a junkyard. Than Star Trek, but that junkyard is going to have lots of the same kind of mass-produced things. So there's going to be lots of engines that look the same, lots of guns that look the same, you know, and things will be recognizable in that way. So I think if the way I would approach crafting for science fiction is, how do I make a lot of things very quickly, because you want it to look mass-produced.
Right.
How can I kind of just like stamp out corridors and stamp out room pieces as quickly and as easily as possible?
Right.
Because
the
they
one
would
thing
all
I think,
look the same.
Yeah, I mean, like, and the way they're explaining part of it is when you go from using your character minis and interacting with those, then when it's a completely different setup for actual space battles. It's more like playing X-Wing. So using, you know, asteroids, miniature ships, you've got your asteroid fields, you know, your moons and all that stuff set up as well.
Yep.
So it's like two vastly different scales on top of everything else.
Yep.
So,
well, that's
but I think
the thing.
it'll be
when you're going to spaceship battles and whatever, then you would take a more X-Wing approach to it. And it also depends. I mean, if you were playing Star Trek again and you're in fluidic space, then you're totally different. Then the actual space is different.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
you know, then it's like a whole different ball game. And if you were playing Mice and Mystics, then you're at a miniaturized thing. You're inside pipes and you're, you know, in the skirting boards and whatever. So what I would do if you were doing Mice and Mystics or something to that scale, I would use actual like floor skirting boards and make walls out of those and cut like little, you know, like mouse holes through them and things and make little doors into that, because that's what it would be. It would be human scale things. So rooms would be, you would get like a tile from like a wooden tile or something like that from the hardware store and actually make a room out of a tile. And actually just like full scale things that you're making miniature stuff inside. You know, like you could put a book down, which is a building, so you carve out the inside of a book, you know. Like a phone directory or whatever. You would make it look more like a medieval book, but you would carve out the inside to make it like a little mouse home or something like that. So, you know, you then have these objects that they would be using at full scale, human scale, but it's now at mouse at mouse level. Which would make the terrain, you know, that makes the terrain way more interesting, because it actually now is evocative of what it actually is.
Right.
And that's the kind of way you'd have to think about it. And it's like, you know, asteroids in space just use big rocks. Famously, one of the asteroids in Star Wars was a potato. They just painted it grey, because that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
You know.
That'd be cool.
Have you can turn your video on, Lee.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. It's in this call.
Yeah, there's a little on the thing where you can see Wylock. There should be a little down the bottom. You get 4 icons. It's the one on the left that turns the camera on.
There we go.
There we go.
You know, I just got my computer back from the shop. It's all updated. No, I'm not expecting any calls right now.
Funky music.
No. So, all right. Is it on?
It's getting there. Yeah, so, you know, how you approach whatever genre it is, you kind of just, you know, you kind of have to step back about, and scale is obviously one thing to think about. And then how the society of this genre would be making things. Would they be unique? Every item is unique, or is it mass produced, or, you know, and kind of work from there and sort of put that philosophy into what it is you're making. And that's why fantasy is so big in terrain building, because every item is unique. whereas there's not a lot of people who do science fiction, and there's not a lot of people who do modern. I mean, there are people who do modern in terms of wargaming, and there are people who do science fiction in terms of wargaming, but that's more just set pieces. But when you're running around in corridors doing that kind of thing, then, you know, there really haven't been many people that do that, if at all. I know there's some people who've done like Space Hulk dioramas, but there's no sort of modern or Star Trek or sci-fi sort of carpeted hallways. I haven't really seen that.
Right.
It is on my list of things
it's
to
like
do.
I saw one with I just totally froze up.
Did we lose you?
No, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nicholas, so hello, Abraham. He's just come back from kindergarten. He's fallen asleep watching the live stream. He's 3 years old.
Oh.
Hello.
No, my video's frozen up. I can still hear you guys, but my video froze up.
That's all good.
So it's now just a picture of Wylock looking concerned.
So Eugene Kwan, new here. What info do you guys provide and discuss? Well, this is about crafting for role-playing games. If you've randomly found this stream. We also talk about a whole bunch of other crap as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure how familiar he is, but there's a bunch of channels out there that, oh, hey, John, a bunch of YouTube channels, including that Gareth and I and Lee run, that talk about different methods for crafting. Cardboard and hot glue.
Mine are generally older. I haven't done anything in a while, but they're almost, some of my wife says are, do not try this at home. I destroy the stuff so you don't have to.
Let's see what damage we can do today.
Oh yeah, so
pretty much
texturing with fire.
Yes.
Unquote.
Another fun one, and I actually did it the other day for a project for my kid, is taking the pipe cleaners, dipping them in rubbing alcohol and lighting them on fire, just so you can use the twisted cable inside as rope.
Yeah,
basically just burn all the fuzz off of it.
I mean, there's so many different ways to do different things, you know, and it's, I mean, there's whole cultures of people who sculpt things in miniatures that don't do it for games. They just do it because they like to make miniature dioramas. It's very big in Japan. Japan likes to make a lot of miniature things, and there's people who they sell. I went into a shop where they had all these miniature dioramas. They were selling for tens of thousands of dollars. I was just amazed.
Oh,
it's like,
boy.
geez, you know, I've got to get into this action.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize how huge miniature railroading was.
Oh yeah.
And so I started went down the rabbit hole watching some of those videos.
Yep.
And their attention to detail is absolutely insane. You know, I mean, some of the stuff I've seen you guys making, there's a whole lot of detail to it. But these guys take it to like an entirely new level. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to try to fake detail, whereas they will actually want to try and put in as much detail as possible. You know, obviously I want to make it quickly and cheaply, but they will spare no expense on having it as detailed as possible. So they will make sure that there are actually lights in the street lamps, and and the gravel and the lines on the roads and the gravel crossings and everything are correct, and the boom gates work, and the and the seasons. You know, they'll have different seasons for the same board. I've seen people go to that sort of level. So, you know, there's like the winter version. So when winter rolls around, they swap out all their scenery and they change it to winter.
There was one guy, I was watching this video, and he was talking about someone else's work at they showed off at some convention, instead of using fake trees, the guy was actually using his board with all his trains on it to grow bonsais.
Yep.
And so he had all live plants
Yep.
on his board. And it was insane. It was incredible. I mean,
there's people
was
who
awesome.
do like garden gnome things. So they basically, their whole garden is like a fantasy sort of thing where they've got fairies and fairy homes and garden gnomes and things. And that's like a whole subculture all on its own. You know, and you never, until the internet rolls around, you never know how many people are actually doing those things. And now all of a sudden you can find there's like, wow, there's 10,000 people that are interested in this, you know. You know, occasionally I go into a newsagent and you find, you know, I just look at the magazines. I don't buy magazines anymore, but I just have a look at what's out there. And there'll be like 1 or 2 gaming magazines. There'll be about 7 computer gaming magazines and about 15 train magazines. You know, like, yeah, trains are still big, but obviously there's so many magazines because it's a much older group of people that that enjoy that kind of thing. Because model railroading is quite an old hobby. Obviously, there's a lot of young people that do it as well, but it is a hobby that's been around a hell of a lot longer than D&D. And you know, wargaming, although, you know, wargaming has been around probably as long. There are more people into trains than there are people into wargaming, I think.
We'll have to fix that.
Yeah, Wylock's got to do a few train videos to kind of like sneak in the train crowd, and then we can feed off his. Somehow I'm going to feed off his waterfall video.
I inherited my grandfather's Lionel train from 1936, and it's still fully functional. You get that nice burning smell when you plug the transformer in. But it's really cool. It's from 1936 or 38, I think. The main engine in front is worth about $6,000.
Yep.
Oh wow.
But yeah, so we put it on the Christmas tree every year. Maybe I will.
I inherited a whole probably about 8 or 9 boxes of train stuff from my grandfather's estate, who died in 1965, and there was just all the stuff in storage. So when I was about 4, I think I inherited all the stuff and a whole lot of what they call dinky toys, which are all like metal toys. And you know, obviously I was 4, so I destroyed a lot of it. But yeah, it was very formative. Trains and Lego. I used to build a lot of train tracks and Lego buildings, and you know, so I've always been a builder in that sense. But
I think Legos were my first terrain for D&D.
Yep. You use what you've got.
Yeah. We didn't even have dice or anything. It was all literally just talking through what you wanted to do and then flip a coin to see if you succeeded at first.
So there's a question from John R. What are some of the most unexpected places you found materials for builds or dungeon dressing items?
Let's see. For me, I went one time Walmart, and I just asked them for some boxes to build some stuff out of. And the lady actually brought me not just boxes and packing materials, but also broken toys that when they got shipped in, they would have been sent back to the manufacturer. And so yeah, she just, it was a bunch of small little broken toys, and they worked out really well. Coolest one is when I get, you know, I hit up garage sales, swap meets, bazaars.
Yeah, the best place to get materials are the most unexpected places. There's the obvious places like going to the dollar store and that sort of thing, but you know, going to a hardware store and going through the hinge section is something I like to do, because you never know, you're going to find something interesting in the hinge section. I once went to a watch repair place to get a whole bunch of miniature cogs, and they gave me a whole bunch of other stuff that were in watches. I don't include that on my channel because it's not something you can find everywhere, so that's why I don't include it. But if you were going to do steampunky things, if you've got anyone, you know, that repairs watches near you, go and hit them up for just bits and pieces of watches, because most of the time that stuff is just thrown away. And if for miniature stuff, that is just like the best.
Yeah, and if you're not in a big hurry to get the stuff, the Wish app, because they're shipping from China, so it can take forever to get it.
Yeah,
I spent $4. I got a huge bag of all different sizes of gears and stuff, some spikes that they're meant to actually, like, I guess, screw into like leather clothes, the bill of your hat, and that kind of stuff. Different jewelry knickknacks, and a lot of them on there say free, just pay shipping.
Yep.
And if you can swim through all the other junk they're trying to sell you, you can get some really phenomenal deals on some decent stuff there. It's just you got to wait for it.
Well, the original D&D miniatures were actually just like plastic junk stuff from China. And then they designed the monsters around them, so that, okay, we can get 50,000 of the boulets.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I remember seeing an article about the original. Now, is it Boulet, or we always pronounce it Bulette?
Yeah,
but, yeah, you know, land shark, whatever you want to call it. But they showed this. It looked like one of those things you get out of like the little quarter vending machines.
Yeah.
And some guy sold one on eBay for, it was like almost $1,200 or something like that.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, now, I mean, it's like anything that becomes a collector's item, it's a rarity is what makes it, you know, a collector's item or unique, one of a kind.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question to say, you know, where the most bizarre places, because all the best places are the most bizarre places.
Yeah.
Because when you've been doing this a while, you're kind of always looking. You're walking down the street and you're just noticing garbage by the side of the road. I mean, it's kind of disturbing to think about it. It's like you're actually just looking at people's garbage. But you know, sometimes there's just like prize stuff that someone's just throwing away. And of course, generally your spouse does not like that, unless they're also into crafting.
Yeah. Well, it's like I've got a neighbor down the street, and in between our houses, there's a big blank field. So the sidewalk in front of it, a lot of people just dump their crap there rather than going to the dump or anything like that. They just throw the garbage kind of towards the opening to this field. And it's like every so often I'll go through there, and I have found shelves, perfect condition, just dumped. Paint brushes. I actually found a box that had like a dozen of the Mage Knight miniatures in it, just tossed off on the side of the road.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's like the other side of it was, when you're building a channel like we are, you know, when you want to use something, one of the things you got to think is like, can everybody actually get this? Because if you go and say, oh, all you need to do is have this, and then the first question is going to come up in the comments, and the 50 questions after that all going to be, where do I get that thing?
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's why I tend to, at least I did when I first started my channel, and as I get ready to reboot, I'll be doing the same thing, is focusing more on the technique side of things, rather than here's how you build this.
Yeah.
You know, it's here's how I did it with what I had available. Here's the way that you can go about doing something similar. Like with my portals, when I build those, 90% of it's out of found materials, you know, old broken clocks, different lids that people may not have access to. And like, I don't know if Sobe is sold everywhere, but like when I make my Demon Forge, it's a Sobe bottle, you know? And not everyone has access to that, but it's more about the technique that they can do it with whatever they've got. That's my goal moving forward is that way they can do the same kind of stuff with whatever they have available.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff.
It's like, for instance, Quasi's Bell, the gentleman who runs that channel.
Yeah.
He sent a whole bunch of us the little plastic toothpick things that are shaped like arrows.
Yeah,
you know,
I've got a
that's
bunch of
great,
those as well.
You know, unless you know exactly where to get those, you know, it's, you know, there's less scope to using that. They are fantastic as materials. And I probably will use them. But the thing is, the moment I put it on my channel and say, this is what you should use, then I will get 1,000 questions as where do I get this from?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, because people already ask me, where do I get cardboard from? I mean, you know, so if I'm not going to highly specialize things, then, you know, then I'm going to have to be answering all those questions as well. And, you know, that is the reality of doing this.
Yeah.
Whereas you say go and get a drinking straw, I mean, where you're not going to be able to get a drinking straw, where you're not going to be able to get aluminium foil or aluminum foil, or however you pronounce it. You know, these things we'll find them everything, and that's why I tend to look at things where, you know, how easy is it for someone anywhere in the world to get this?
Yep.
Because, for instance, you know, Black Magic Crafts channel, which, you know, I'm a huge fan of Pillar Pals. But, you know, when it comes to foam is expensive here. And because we just, you know, we're never that cold, so we just don't have that kind of insulation. So immediately there's a problem with getting the basic building materials. You can get it, but then it is more expensive. So you are investing more so than you would in the US or the UK, where you've got a much colder climate in the Northern Hemisphere. So, you know, those are the things you've got to think about. You know, it's like, I'm thinking, I've got a lot of fans who are in Argentina and Brazil, which I would never in my life have thought that the third highest watching audience of my channel would be Brazil. But they are. There's a lot of people in Brazil who watch my channel. And I suspect that it's part of the fact that, you know, I'm using materials that are available everywhere. I like to think that that's why they're watching. Maybe in Portuguese I'm saying funny things. I don't know. Maybe I look like a celebrity in Brazil. I'm not sure. But yeah, you know, and it's, to me, it's fascinating that, you know, there are people all over the world who want to do these things. Whereas, you know, when I was a kid in the 90s, you know, you felt very isolated, and you felt like, you know, you were only a handful of people. And then you were looking at news reports from America where, you know, the religious fundamentalists were going anti the thing that you enjoyed, and you think, oh, well, you know, it's just going to dry up and that's that. So you kind of like, now to discover that there are people all over the world to do things that you like is probably the single best thing that's come from the internet. Is that people can build these kinds of communities, and people can actually enjoy the things that they're enjoying, even though the other people live on the other side of the world. I mean, I've never met you guys in person. I've only ever corresponded with you this way or on Facebook. But, you know, I'm sure if we all met in a pub, the conversation would continue, and they would be as though we'd been friends for 5 years, which however long it has been, you know. I don't think the digital barrier would you know, would fall away, and it would be exactly the same. I mean, there may be certain differences, like I would probably look a lot bigger or a lot smaller. I don't know. But, you know, I mean, that's, you know, that's the I've used special filters.
All right, guys, I got to drop off here.
Yeah, I think it's time to draw this to a close. I'd just like to thank everybody who has joined us, and everyone who's Skyped in. So Bill and Cody and Lee. And of course, this will be run again, which is the 4th Friday for Americans of every month, and usually 8 p.m. Eastern. So if you wish to join us in the future, 4th Friday of the month, 8 p.m. Eastern, and it will be on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Periscope all at the same time. So thank you for joining us, and see you guys later.
See you, man. Thanks.
Cheers.